Yes, we see you pinned. Yes. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are going to get started in just about 2 minutes with our forum. Thanks for being here, and we'll start soon.
All right, I'm gonna do it. No, I'm gonna go and try
Hello,
to
everyone, and welcome.
listen while I drive.
We will ask you to please mute your audio.
I grow bad apples.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are going to get started in just about another minute here. All right, welcome, everyone. I'm going to get us started because we have a packed agenda today, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to cover all of the important information that our panelists have brought forward to our forum today. And so welcome, everyone, to our forum on local food production in the era of climate change. Hopefully, many of you were able to join our forum that we had back in May on farming and food, farmland preservation and local food production. This is really a companion to that forum that we had. So if you have not seen that, I encourage you after this to go back and watch that. That was all about the importance of farmland preservation and what we can do to preserve farmland in Clark County. We will be touching on that topic today as a continuation of that discussion. And we're going to extend and really talk about local food and and really talk about the impacts of climate change on our community. I do want to mention that we're recording this session so that we can post it on our website and you can go back and get some more, watch again or share with friends. Hopefully you find lots of great information today. I will just mention that this photo is from Shady Grove Farm. It's a beautiful picture of their organic farm right here in Clark County. All right, away we go. Just a bit about Friends of Clark County, and I should also introduce myself. My name is Mo McKenna. I'm on the board of Friends of Clark County. I work on the communications team, and I also work with our farmer engagement program. And I'm also a farmer here in Clark County. My husband and I run a small family farm. We focus on flowers, but we also do grow food and for our family. We grow fruits and vegetables and all sorts of delicious things to eat. And I've been a farmer for a very long time, including a veggie farmer. So this is a topic near and dear to my heart. Just a little bit more about Friends of Clark County. We are a 501c3 nonprofit here based in the county. We are the only organization that defends the Growth Management Act. That might sound really boring, but actually the Growth Management Act and land use planning is incredibly important for livability. This is the decisions that are made with land use planning and with the Growth Management Act are what's going to be open spaces, what's going to be parks, what's going to be forests, what's going to stay a farm versus a development. It impacts so many parts of our lives, but it's oftentimes invisible to those of us unless we're really involved. So Friends of Clark County is deeply engaged with making sure that our county remains a place where there's lots of outdoor activities, there's lots of wildlife and habitats for future generations. And we care deeply about farming and about local food. We will talk more about what you can do to support us at the end. But without too much more, I want to jump into a few kind of just cover some what we're going to do today and a few notes for you. So we have 3 panelists that I will introduce very shortly here. They're going to present for 45 minutes just in order to contextualize our conversation. And they have some slides to share with you, lots of great information. And then we will have a 25-minute panel discussion. At the end, we're going to have some ideas for you if you want to support local food, things you can do. There are lots of things that you can do that we're not going to cover. We're really taking this from a perspective of the Friends of Clark County lens. So I know that if you're here, you already care about this topic, and I hope that you will continue to do those things that you're already doing related to local food, our local food system. If you need something, Carissa can help you. So she's got the Friends of Clark County in the chat. You're welcome to chat her a direct message if you need something. And then following the webinar, we will be sending all of this information by email. So you'll get a link to the recording, you'll get the slides, and we will also ask you to fill out a brief survey that helps us just get better as we think about how we deliver these forum topics and what you might be interested in. And thank you for being here. We really appreciate you taking time out of your evening to learn about this topic. All right, that's all my housekeeping. Let's talk about our awesome panelists that we have here. We're going to hear from 3 folks today. We're going to hear from Justin O'Day. Justin is a regional agricultural specialist with WSU Extension. He primarily administers the Southwest Washington Ag Extension for WSU in Clark, Cowlitz, and Skamania counties. Justin also is a soil scientist. He specializes in mushroom growing and specialty crops and is just a fascinating individual that I hope you'll follow what he's doing and get involved with all of his educational programs. Next, we're going to hear from Diane Dempster. Diane is actually the vice president of Friends of Clark County and a board member. And I will just mention that if you're looking for lessons of how to really continue to be active and provide a lot of value to your community in your retirement, Diane is an awesome person to look at. She also serves on the board of the Tilt Alliance and the Clark County Food Systems Council. I don't know how she does it. Incredibly busy and incredibly awesome. And then we have Mike Stewart. I love his title, the Chief Equipment Officer. Or Chief Equipment Operator, CEO of Sweet Bloom Farm. Sweet Bloom is a farm right here in Clark County, and he has a very interesting story, so I'm not going to steal any of his thunder from his presentation time. With that, I am going to turn it over to Justin, and we are going to have him share his slides. So I'm going to stop my share, and we're going to hand it over to Justin to kick things off.
Can you see that?
We can see it.
Great. Okay. All right. So first thing I want to kind of put forth with this is, well, I got to move the Zoom screen here. Okay. Is an understanding of our natural resource base that we have here in Clark County. Ecologically and geologically speaking, the majority of Clark County is in the greater Willamette Valley agro-ecoregion, meaning that we essentially share the same climate and the same geologic history of these deep productive soils that were deposited by the glacial Lake Missoula floods. You can see really clearly on these on this map on the left, right, on the right here of the flood deposits very closely mirror what you see as either farmland or former farmland on the satellite image on the left. All right, so before colonial settlement, a large portion of these soils hosted oak camas prairie ecosystems. Camas in particular historically has been a prized staple food in indigenous cultures throughout many regions in the Northwest, with early accounts describing rich camas prairies located in Clark County. Camas can actually be thought as one of the earliest forms of agriculture in our region, as camas prairies are often actively managed by periodic burning by indigenous populations. And as this quote mentions, the open nature of these camas prairies and their apparent abundance was something that became sought after as potential farming grounds by post-colonial settlers. So due to these soils' high productivity potential and their location near major growing urban commerce hubs of Vancouver and Portland, post-colonial farming throughout the region has also been abundant and diverse as well, with a wide variety of crops of importance being produced here over the past 100 years. So to put Clark County in perspective with other counties in Washington, we actually have the highest average soil productivity rating of any county in Washington, the third highest number of farms in the state. And because we're a relatively small county, we actually have the highest farm density of any other county in the state, with just over 3 farm businesses per square mile. Our profile is also rather unique, being really diverse with no single commodity or ag industry dominating, and a lot of our farms are part-time endeavors. Nonetheless, despite these the positive factors I've mentioned so far, a really dominant theme that's echoed by Clark County farmers in real time are challenges to economic viability. The majority of these relate back to the effects of acute urbanization pressure on multiple levels, including the effect of policies enacted that favor competing interests, or those that just simply do not sufficiently safeguard agriculture from competing interests. Compounding this is sort of this like relative isolation that tends to occur here, as we're geographically separated from other major centers of production in Washington. And even though there's an ecological and proximal connection to the Willamette Valley, there's nonetheless a very palpable political, cultural, and physical isolation effect that's evident. Our ag profile has also significantly diverged from the stereotype of Western agriculture over the years, where our farms are increasingly diverse and decoupled from commodity production and related ag industries. And all this context together sort of works to effectively muddle our identity, where we're part of the Willamette Valley, but we're not. We're part of Washington, but we're more closely tied to Oregon from a practical standpoint. And Also, we're somewhat compromised from having a critical mass of ag interests locally here, justifying support at an economic level and at a policy level. For instance, if you're an ag supplier or food processor, are you going to choose to locate in Clark County or somewhere further southward into the Willamette? Or what about being a policymaker making decisions about land use? And I think a lot of people in the room here probably have a sense of how the latter question in particular is playing out. And I'm going to use some county to county contrast to try and help illustrate things that have actually become evident. So I'm going to first use Washington County, Oregon, and Clark County because they share a lot of common circumstances. Farms in each county are part of the Portland metro area, with most farms in each county being located within 30 miles of Portland. The two counties also share a similar size and a population density, and also have a comparable amount of soils that are actually classified as farmland, and have a near equal average soil productivity rating as well. As of right now, there's also a comparable number of farms, but things start to diverge here with average farm size and here with acres and farms. Now, this divergence is undoubtedly caused by a number of factors and dynamics, but it's really hard to ignore what I'm going to try and illustrate on this next slide here. So this is a map of soils classified as farmland, and the color coding is their productivity rating in each county. And this next map here is how the development patterns on farmland have manifested very differently in these two counties. So this map is showing those same farmland soils, but these are the ones that have been developed on at least as of 2016. Washington County overall has lost less farmland to development. What's equally important here are the patterns that you see. Washington County appears to have maintained very constrained urban growth boundaries. In comparison to Clark County, the development patterns you see in Clark County effectively fracture contiguous land and farms, which you can get a sense of from this next map here of land and farms as of 2016. And so I'm going to sort of give a half hypothetical example here of how this kind of parcelization of farmland can have cascading effects on farm viability. So say that the property outlined in the green here is your home farm. And to get an economy of scale for what you want to grow, you rent this parcel from farm number 1 and another parcel from farm number 2. Farm number 1 gives you right of way to that second parcel through their land on this green dotted line. Now let's see what happens in the next 30 years. So farmer 1 has gotten old, they've subdivided, they've sold, and you lost 1/3 of your production capacity. You still have parcel number 2 to rent, but your access changes. You're now sort of marooned on an ag island of sorts, and now you've got to move equipment on a busy road through subdivisions and past a growing industrial park. Meanwhile, farmer number 2 has sold to a couple that want to retire to the country. They sign a lease for you to keep farming it, but within a few years, they're kind of getting tired of dust on their property. And I think everybody's probably getting the idea of what I'm getting at here. These scenarios are all things that farmers have actually relayed to me. So in addition to farming just being a difficult business in general, you're increasingly faced with the prospect of either number 1, selling out, or number 2, making drastic changes to business as usual. Looking at the economic statistics from these two counties, you can see continued divergence. Washington County currently produces about 2.4 times as much value per acre than Clark County farms. The gross revenue per farm and overall revenue from Clark County agriculture is also soberingly low for a county with so much productive potential. These kind of numbers, unfortunately, make it really hard to make an economic argument for Clark County agriculture and preserving it. Um, and so sort of the contrast between these two counties also begins to highlight this situation of unmet economic potential as well. Part of this unmet potential is illustrated by this map I showed before. When you look at the type of farmland, and you can see that Clark County's farmland is dominated by hay and or pasture. Hay is a notably low value per acre farm product. Unfortunately, and probably all too often, this can be driven by it simply being a low input way to keep land in agriculture for property tax reasons and or while holding out for the right opportunity to subdivide and sell. So it begs the question, what might Clark County farmers do different? We can already see that there's two different trajectories taking place here, despite their proximity, despite their common contexts. But are there other examples that we can learn from? So I'm just going to share two here that are kind of notable. First one is Santa Cruz County, California. This is another peri-urban county near the Bay Area. Note that their soil productivity potential and their total farm acreage are lower than Clark County's. But even under this context, their economic story is still pretty extraordinary. This county ranks as number 4 nationally for value produced per acre, with revenues about 14 times higher than Clark County's. The county is also in the top 3% for total ag product value produced by a county. Some of the standout factors for this county are number 1, intensive use of their farmland, and number 2, production that's really centered around high value per acre specialty crops such as vegetables, fruits, nuts, nursery and greenhouse crops, so on and so forth. My second example is from Suffolk County, New York, on the east end of Long Island. This is a county that's operating in an even more highly urbanized and more isolated context. Note that their soil productivity ratings are lower than Clark County's and have less land and farms than any of the other counties that I've mentioned so far. The economic story here is a little bit less dramatic than the last, but nonetheless remarkable in a few ways. So this county ranks at number 9 nationally for ag product value produced per acre, producing about 10.2 times more value per acre than Clark County farms. And is also in the top 12% nationally for total county value produced by farms. This is very much a case where small ag has managed to still be big ag economically. Production in this county is also showing another adaptation, taking advantage of their proximity to direct urban markets and embracing value-added products. Altogether, 73% of 73% of this county's ag product value is derived from more localized sales and from value-added products. This is far higher than any of the other counties that I've mentioned so far. So just in summary, some of the challenges that we're faced with: formidable competing interests, difficult farm operation challenges from urbanization, increasingly shrinking fractured land base, growing pains, the cost of farm evolution and change. And then the current policy environment is insufficient to support ag growth, evolution, and farmland protection and food security. Some of the opportunities that we have: an outstanding natural resource base, production potential, and opportunity to safeguard future food security. We have an opportunity to reinvent our ag and identify common needs to bolster our collective ag support, and then identify and capitalize on new emerging markets, urban markets. And then lastly, individual farm business innovation to reinvent farm business growth in a more urbanized context. That's all I got.
Thanks so much, Justin. I
Yeah.
will have you stop your screen share and I will go back into my slides, but we really appreciate you and can't wait to hear more in the panel discussion.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to move our spotlight over to Diane. Oh, wait, I did that wrong. Do you ever do things wrong? I did. All right, there's Diane. Hello, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screens and advance your slides.
Thank you very much.
Here we go. You're in, Diane. Take it
Okay,
away.
before I start, I'd like to introduce myself and share a little bit of my background. Before I retired, I was a buyer and salesperson for a wholesale produce company, Charlie's Produce in Seattle. And I have been in the marketing side working with growers for probably 35 years. So my bent has always been working with local growers, and I think that's more important than ever. So I just wanted to share that. You want to go to my next slide? So good. Justin did a great job of setting the stage for where we're at in Clark County. Thank you very much. I'm going to try to expand and talk about a little bit more of the marketing side of things and food distribution in general. But as we know, good growing conditions are essential to a producer's success, but so is the ability for them to sell and market their products at a profit. I'm going to expand on the marketing side of things a little bit and what it takes to have a good local food economy. We can all agree that growing food close to home is a good idea. It combats climate change, builds food security, tastes better, and it's good for the local economy. But Clark County has lost a lot of food production, and it no longer has the support system it needs. Next slide. So there's some key elements to having a successful food system that I think most of us aren't necessarily aware of. First and foremost, producers need to make a living at farming or ranching. They also need land, productive land that's affordable and has access to water. And as Justin mentioned, small plots, they need plots that are close together for obvious reasons. Small plots far apart from each other means that a farmer has to travel distances to get from one field to the other. And that just makes farming economically difficult. Producers also need farm supplies and equipment businesses nearby, as well as educational resources such as those WSU provides. They also need a variety of markets. Right now, most of the markets that are available to growers in Clark County are direct markets, farmers markets, CSAs, that sort of thing. But to have a successful food system, you also need to be able to sell to wholesalers, to processors, and as well as direct to consumers. Farmers also need non-punitive regulations and right to farm laws. Right to farm laws are those that give preference to farms over disputes with development or individual residents, sorry. Urbanites like the idea of living near a farm because farms are beautiful, but they often don't like the smell, the early hours, and slow-moving tractor traveling on the road. We need zoning and land use laws that support agriculture. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit of where our food comes from and how it gets to market. You can do the next slide. Most of the food travels a very long way. It comes from overseas. It has to go from the farm to a packing shed, to another shed, to the port, often to a second port, to a wholesaler, and to a retailer. Domestic food that's grown in the United States also goes from the farm to a packing shed, to a wholesaler, to a retailer. And as you can see, almost all the commodities handle a similar route. I didn't address meat here because that's kind of a completely different animal, pardon the pun, and not something I'm as familiar with. So next slide. One of the things that most of us are not aware of is the seasons of produce. So much of our food is available year round that we're not aware of where things are grown and when. So this is a chart that shows what some of the items are grown where they're grown at different times of the year. July and September are the peak season for everything Washington and Oregon grown, although there's a few commodities that are grown almost year round here. Onions and potatoes, for example, are often Washington grown, mostly year round. But apples and pears, though we have quite a few of them here, we're the highest producer of those two commodities in the United States. In the spring, they're often coming from New Zealand or Chile. And in the summer, a lot of people expect to have local strawberries in the early spring, but they don't ripen here until late May, early June. And so stores are required to tell consumers the country of origin, but they're not required to tell people what state things are from. So when you're shopping at a grocery store, ask the grocer where the produce you're buying comes from and encourage them to buy it from Washington State or even Clark County. Okay, next slide. This slide shows how far food travels. As you can see, a lot of it travels a very long ways. There's more and more produce coming that's grown in Mexico, different parts of Mexico, but even sometimes cucumbers year round will be grown in Mexico. And that's a very long ways from here. Most things travel by truck. And so of course, the more we buy local, the less time it's in transit. It's generally will be sweeter, more nutritious if you buy it locally. Next slide. A large percentage of the food sold in the US is sold in grocery stores. And there's 4 major grocery chains that sell over 65% of the food. Most small and mid-sized growers, which are the ones we have largely in Clark County, can't sell directly to these store chains. The store chains have specific packaging requirements, high quality standards, and they demand really cheap prices, as well as a consistent supply. These are things that most growers can't meet. Independent grocery stores often buy direct from producers, but most chain stores don't. And consolidation in the grocery industry means there's fewer and fewer independent retail stores. So that means there's fewer stores for growers to sell to. And some of the chains will buy, like I mentioned, something like cucumbers from Mexico because it's a lot cheaper to grow it there, and they can pay a way cheaper price, even when it's grown here in Washington State. Okay, next slide. So local food doesn't always cost more than what you find in the supermarket, but if it does, there's some very good reasons. Larger growers have the economies of scale on their side, and labor is another big one. Wages in Mexico are a fraction of those in Washington State, which has the highest minimum wage in the country. And most producers pay over $20 an hour for help, while workers in Mexico get about $8 a day. Growers in California and Arizona can get 2 to 3 crops per season because of the favorable climate, where Washington growers can get only 1 crop. Many local growers can harvest more than what they sell in a day, but might not have cooler or freezer or packaging facilities where they can keep it fresh to sell to other markets. This can significantly limit their income. Okay, next slide. So what can we do to support a local food system? Well, first of all, we need to preserve all the land, all the agricultural land that we have left. This is obviously a goal of Friends of Clark County. And I think it takes a lot of political will, but it's one of the first things we can do. I think another would be to have agricultural districts where farmers are clumped together in a region to make it easier for farms to support each other. and that we need to assure that all farms have water rights. That's a significant problem for most farms in Western Washington, because in Eastern Washington, a lot of the farms come with water rights, or they are given water rights. But in this area, it wasn't until climate change started happening. A lot of farms didn't need irrigation because it rained in the summer, whereas it no longer does that very frequently. And so water is a huge issue. And that's a political thing that needs to be addressed. We also need to develop and support facilities that growers can use for cooling, freezing, packaging, support warehouses that will handle produce, and make it easy for farmers to package their stuff. Because one of the things that happens is that if something is harvested but not given a cooler or a proper temperature, it will fade fairly quickly and then not be available for sale to another market that might have something to do. And there need to be unique and new marketing opportunities for growers, and Justin mentioned this as well. So we also need to have right to farm laws, as I mentioned earlier, and there's some statewide efforts to support local and statewide buy local campaigns, and I think we need to support that. So that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane, so much. We're going to be excited to hear more from you in the panel discussion. Let's see if I can get this right this time and place and bring Mike up. Did I do it? All right. Hi, Mike.
Hey there.
All right, take it away, sir.
All right. My name is Mike Stewart, and I am a co-owner of Sweet Bloom Farm with my wife. We are in Battleground, Washington, and we are primarily a flower farm, but we do produce vegetables for the farmers markets. We do eggs. We do some pastured poultry, and I have collaborated with a farm in Oregon to do some free-range regenerative beef. So I'm kind of a mixed bag when it comes to farming in Clark County. Next. So, like I said, we're a cut flower farm. We specialize in dahlias. We got bees, we got honey, we got eggs, and like I said, we do beef. My background, though, is I come from California. Grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, worked in the fire service in California for 22 years. I was an instructor and did quite a bit with that. In 2018, I had to leave the fire service due to severe PTSD, work-related, due to the massive fires in California. And it took me doing this presentation to realize that I actually qualify as a climate refugee. Because of my PTSD, I was not able to stay in California. I was having panic attacks pretty much every day, and it was just an untenable situation. My wife and I took a couple road trips to try to figure out where to go. We came to Clark County in September of 2020, and it was raining and green. And we figured that that was a pretty good sign that we're going to have a lot less fire behavior here than we did in California. So a little background on fires in my career, just to kind of show the effects of climate change, specific to California, but pretty much everywhere as well. My first season I worked for CAL FIRE was 2000. I went to the Story Fire. When I got there, it was about 38,000 acres. When we left, it was about 60,000 acres. They spent about $22 million on that fire, and it was a big deal. It was a very large fire for the time. I think at the time it was the biggest going in the state. A few years later, 2006, we had the Day Fire in Southern California. It burned 162,000 acres, cost $70 million, and at one point had 4,600 firefighters fighting that fire. Again, that was the largest fire in 2006. The last fire that I worked on that contributed greatly to my PTSD was the Mendocino Complex fire, and that started in July and wasn't contained until September, so 2 months. It burned 459,000 acres, burned down 280 structures, caused $257 million in damages, and cost $200 million to fight. So in a span of 18 years, we watched fires, what I considered a large fire, to go from 60,000 acres to 459,000 acres. And I thought that was pretty wild. So if we go to the next slide, that fire is now the number 3 fire in California history. So just since 2018, they had a 963,000 acre fire and a fire that was over 1 million acres. And that's just in 21 years. Right now, the one that's in red is the Park Fire. It's currently burning, and it's 400,000 acres and number 4 on the list. And it's really early in the season because if you look at the dates, a lot of those fires were August, September, October fires. So it's pretty wild that they're getting that kind of fire behavior in California this early in the season. And it's not because we're not raking the forests. It has to do with climate change. So how does that impact farmers? They're seeing decreased crop yields, especially the vineyards in Northern California. Smoke damages wine grapes badly, and so they end up throwing a lot of grapes and a lot of wine away, which costs hundreds of millions of dollars in crop losses. You can see it in other crops as well, but mostly it really hits the grapes hard. But it also increases employee stress and has poor health outcomes. The employee stress is not only from having to work while fires are going on, but while they're working, they're worried about their homes, they're worried about their families, they're worried about their communities and everything else that's going on, while having to work outside in hot, smoky conditions. So your farm labor, who has to be outside working, or crops aren't getting harvested, are having to suffer through a lot of the impacts of these fires, and potential crop losses as well. So I left California. I left the fires behind. I try my best not to think about them, and we moved up here. We were already backyard farmers down there. We were growing our dahlias. We were doing eggs and chickens in our backyard and some bees in our backyard, and we literally packed all that kind of stuff up with us and brought it up here. Through good therapy and moving up here, my mental health has gotten significantly better, and what I'm learning is farming is great therapy for me, and I think if they did some studies, they'd find it for other people as well. But being outside, farming is not stressful as a day-to-day operation. It can be as a business owner, but the actual farming part is pretty relaxing. And so that's where we are and what we're doing now. So climate change and farming in the Pacific Northwest. What are we seeing since I've been here? We've had heat domes and extreme heat. Our flowers react to heat quite badly. When we get temperature spikes, they actually shut down production. You can see my field in my screen behind me. But dahlias will shut down when it's over 90 degrees and they will stop growing. They go into like a protective mode. And then we get some cool weather and they jump up a little bit, and then we get some hot weather and they shut down. So we're not getting consistent production. We're having these up and down spikes, and it's causing a lot of planning issues. We're seeing a lot of different pests as it warms up. Different insects and bugs are able to take a foothold here. I just had a scientist from the state come by the farm and do some inspecting, and I asked him what he was looking for, and he said they are patrolling for bugs that aren't in the state yet that might hitchhike in. So with the climate change, they're expecting us to start seeing some of the insects that affect farms in California and even down in the South. On that, we as farmers aren't used to those kind of pests. And we don't have our defenses up. The plants aren't as tolerant, and we're having to learn as we go on how to deal with these things. The other thing with the heat domes and extreme heat is it's harder to work long days. You know, when it's 90+ degrees outside, it's really hard to be out in the field, taking a beating, working. So I've been getting up really early in the morning on the hot days, you know, getting out at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning and doing my work, and calling it a day at noon, and hiding inside just to get out of the sun and that. As we said earlier, there's a lack of cooling infrastructure, both on farm and off farm. We have to, as soon as we cut our flowers and as soon as we harvest our crops, we need to get them cooled off, and so they hold longer and better. We have a small cooler on the farm, but because we are direct to consumer, that's all we have. We don't have the access to warehousing and, you know, putting it in a nice big cold room. So we have to provide what we can for ourselves. And when you're limited on farm space, every building you put up is less productive area. And so if you're having to build a cooler, that means you're not growing or doing anything else with that space. And we're seeing, I believe that we're seeing more snow and ice in the wintertime, which is not as big of a concern for growing, but it just makes life a little bit tougher when you live rural, because they don't plow the roads as good as they do in town. So some of the climate resilient farming methods that we're using is hoop houses and shade cloth. We use the hoop houses in the early spring and in the fall as a season extension. We use it so that we can have a little bit more heat earlier in the season and later in the season, and try to extend our season a little bit more. And then in the summer, switching to shade cloth to try to keep some of the more tender plants protected longer. And it just helps. I've also seen some shade cloth used as bug cloth, and it tends to help. I use drip watering on our farm, putting the water right on the plants. We don't get as much evaporation. It helps keep the soil a little bit cooler, and works really good for what we're doing. And then mulch versus weed cloth. For small producers, mulch can be an option, but it's a cost. It's something we have to bring in. It's something that we have to use labor to spread, and you know, it can be used properly, but it takes a lot more labor. Whereas weed cloth, the pluses is you just put it down in the spring, grow on it all season. We use reusable weed cloth on our farm. We're able to roll it up, put it away for the winter, bring it back out in the summer. Other people try to use the biodegradable weed cloths and films, and I don't know much about them, but I've heard they work okay. The bad side of weed cloth, at least on the food production side, is that's probably a contributor to microplastics. And it's more plastic waste when we get done using it and have to throw it away. I try to recycle ours as much as we can. But you know, it's a consideration when you're talking about trying to be as environmentally friendly as you can be on our farm. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Mike. All right, I'm now going to try to pin all our panelists. Let's see if I can do this. I'm going to add Justin. I'm going to add Diana. Myself. I did it. Woo! All right, everybody, let's dive into a discussion here. I'm going to pull up some questions. Give me just one moment to get those teed up, and then away we'll go. All right, so my first question is for Justin. We're going to rewind and go all the way back to the beginning of this discussion, right? We've covered a lot already, but let's go back, think about what you had shared with us. I actually don't think a lot of people consider the natural potential of soil when they're thinking about land use planning. My sense is that a lot of land use planning is around maybe proximity to a major freeway, proximity to a port, how close is it to other, commercial development. but I don't hear that there's really much focus on soil potential. Can you just speak more about the importance of soil potential to land use planning?
Yeah, yeah, I haven't yet found any sort of land use planning platform or like calculator, anything of the sort that's used by any one jurisdiction or anything that helps land use planners prioritize farmland. I mean, I've heard of certain counties with a strong farming contingent and a strong ag lobby within the county, um, prioritizing farmland and farm businesses, but nothing to like talk about like something more specific to the soil. Um, we we actually some of the maps I showed where it had the inherent productivity potential in different shades of green to yellow to red. That was actually intended. That's a GIS platform that was intended sort of for that purpose. Um, it's still kind of like in beta and it's kind of buggy, but that's actually like the ultimate goal of that is to develop something that could be used by land use planners, um, especially in like urbanizing areas where there's a lot of conflict between housing and industry and just general community development versus agriculture. Yeah. And I even wanted to work like economic models in where you could plug in different scenarios of, you know, what could be produced there and what kind of ongoing like income could you bring over the years in the long term.
Somebody get Justin a grant so he can.
Yeah, that's the next.
That would be awesome. Great. My next question is for Diane. The idea of potential was really at play in your presentation as well, and really that we're not realizing the potential of our local food system. You shared a lot of great ideas for what we could do. Can you just expand upon maybe like the top one or two things that you see would like make the most impact in our county in terms of helping us have a really strong and healthy local food system? You're muted.
Muted.
Let me see if I can.
I got it. So yeah, it's a complex question because of it's a combination of urbanization, I think, the problems that we have, as well as the way the food system has grown and changed. And so that there's, like I said before, there's been so much consolidation, and it's really difficult to, I think we need to do a lot to uplift the growers that we have and make things easier for them, and help find expanded markets. For example, growers can sell to wholesalers who sell to grocery stores, and that sometimes is a good market, but without without individual coolers, or the ability to have post-harvest handling, they don't have the resources to be able to sell to expand the market beyond direct marketing. So I would say, if there were resources developed so that growers could get the cooling facilities that they need, as well as packaging resources if they're interested in expanding to a different type of marketing than what's available. A lot of farms aren't interested in selling at farmers markets, or some aren't, and it's not an easy road to do. I mean, it's time consuming, it's labor intensive, and the sales aren't always what the growers need. And they put a lot of time and effort into going to the market. And if they don't sell everything, you know, that's a whole lot of time and energy wasted. So I think having some kind of coordinated effort where we look at what some of the different options would be in order to sell to different stores, and what it would take to sell to a retail store or to sell to a farm stand, and what is needed, could be really helpful to both growers. So I think a coordinated effort on just focusing on marketing. It doesn't seem like there's enough markets for all the product that's grown here.
Mike, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, we did the farmers markets for the last 4 years, and like she was saying, a lot goes into it. A 4-hour farmers market day takes the better part of 8 hours to pull off, between harvesting, prepping, driving, setting up, selling, breaking down, bringing everything home, cleaning up, and resetting to start it all over again. It's an 8-hour day every day you do a market. Last year I was doing 3 markets a week, so that was 24 hours a week that I had to focus on being on the market end of things and not on the growing end of things. And unless you're willing to hire an employee, and then that's a whole nother set of costs and everything else that goes into it. I love the farmers markets. I think they're fabulous, but it's tough.
This is your therapy though, Mike.
It is, but my therapy is I'm
In the
finding it,
field.
but not not at the market.
Great. I just want to let everyone know, if you have questions in the audience, we will work to get to you. We're going to have a few more questions for the panelists, and then if we have time, which I feel like we might, we'll come and have some questions from folks that are joining as well. So for this next question, I'm going to come to Mike first, and then I'll invite Diane and Justin to weigh in if you'd like. But really, over the past 25 or 30 years, I think we've all seen the impacts of climate change. I mean, Mike, your just conversation about what it looked like from 2000 to 2018 with the growth of fires, and now what it's been since you left, was just really startling in terms of the increasing intensity and size and cost of wildfires. But a lot of climate change planning comes in these kind of like big national or international things, agreements at the summits, and focus on like, we need more wind power, we need more EVs and all these things. But actually, Washington State is really unique that the state legislature last year passed GMA climate legislation, Bill 1181, which actually requires local planning for climate change in Washington State. So from your perspective, what local planning for climate change would really help to help you as a farmer to be more productive, grow more food, grow more products for our local market?
I think the biggest one, and I think we all know, is holding land back from developers and classifying land as farmland, classifying land as ag production, forestry production. Every time concrete or asphalt is put on a piece of land, it's never coming back as farmland. No one is ever going to tear up a parking lot to put in a farm. There's no money. Farmland is ridiculously expensive here. So I see people in the chat talking on, why aren't there as many farms producing vegetables? And it's startup costs. It's coming up with enough money to buy, an acre of land. There's several parcels around me that are for sale that I would love to get my hands on, and I would need somewhere between 1.5 and $4 million to do that. And I'm not going to make that back in farm income. So it's going to turn into houses unless the government steps in and says we can't do that, that it has to stay as farmland, and that will help stabilize farm values and land values and make it more obtainable for people to come in. And I think another thing is water, and you spoke to it earlier. There's a big struggle for water rights in the western half of the state. For us, we don't have water rights. We get our guaranteed 5,000 gallons a day out of the ground if we want to take it. But that's it. And for a farm like me, that's probably okay. There's a lot of bigger farms that 5,000 acres is not going to help them hardly at all. So until farms know that they can farm without having to buy treated water from the county, like that's another cost and something we got to deal with.
I would have reiterated the water rights component too. Well, both. both things that Mike mentioned, but water rights has been mentioned by every type of farmer that I've encountered just about uh, throughout the Northwest. It probably has to be done in a sort of balanced or like multi-pronged way where we're like simultaneously working on water efficiency in agriculture and like incentives to do that and like but yeah, it's huge. It's putting farms out of business or threatening to. Absolutely.
Would like to add that one of the differences that Justin pointed out between Washington County, Oregon and Clark County is that in that Oregon has strict land use laws that protect farmland, and Washington State doesn't have the same laws. And so I think a lot of the development that we've seen has been the urbanization that we've seen in Clark County is people working in Portland and living here because of taxes and the less strict land use laws. And that is something that, you know, we can't really go back on, but we should at least acknowledge. And that's, I think, and also in part why the land in Washington County is clumped into agricultural districts. And they do look at soil type, I thought, in the land use planning sphere. But I know that it's a difficult for, I think the other thing that we need to do is develop, work on having land preserved as land trusts, because when a farm, a lot of times farmers don't have a choice. The only resource, the only asset they have is their land. And so they are waiting, they are growing hay or letting it go to pasture and using it as a tax deferment, but not really cultivating the soil or making it into better farmland for the next generation. And so then you have a whole depleted resource base. So it's really a multifaceted approach that we have to take. And I think if we could develop land use laws that said no net loss of agricultural land in the county, that would be the first place to start, because that could make it so that land isn't so expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, what's been really driving up a lot of the cost of farmland is agricultural land speculation, right? The idea that you can buy this ag land, put a multi-million-dollar house on it, get a tax deferment by, producing a little bit of hay, and then when it comes time for a comprehensive plan update, you can divide it, and the county's going to say, yes, you can subdivide that, right? So there's all this speculation that happens. Something that a phrase that I've kind of come back to in my head again and again is farmers farming on farmland. That's what I want to see in the future. I want to see farmers farming on farmland. Can we make that happen? I think we can. But that would be kind of my simple call to action for this group is how do we make that happen in this county? I'm a farmer farming not on farmland, which is expensive. Well, my soil is great though. I have a Sarasota loam and I'll brag about it all day. So my next question is for let's see.
Diane,
Where am I in this?
number 4.
Let's do Diane on this one. Diane, one of the challenges with climate change is that it's happening really slowly over time, right? Like every year it gets a little hotter, every year it gets a little drier, every year we have more ice, right? I've lived in the Pacific Northwest since 2008, and I feel like I've seen some of that change in my time, where we used to say that it wasn't summer until the 4th of July. That is no longer the case. It's very much summer in June. So, I think what we need from our, what we need to do now is to act actually really quickly, right? We need to change these systems in order to become more resilient in climate change, and we need to do it fast. The pandemic was actually an example where the food system had to adjust really quickly to new conditions, right? New supply chain challenges. How do you think our food system performed during that time?
Well, I think the best people to ask would be the farmers, but I think that we failed in a lot of ways because we didn't have systems set up to support the very people that were growing the food closest to home. And we were dependent, and we still are dependent on Mexican produce in the middle of the summer. And, you know, we all learned, I mean, the meat industry was seriously affected because by the pandemic, because the USDA has certain regulations for what can be sold, and the packing sheds, the meat packing facilities were challenged without people to staff them, and so there's different parts of the food system that really failed. One of the things that has been a good thing was that the Washington State Department of Agriculture decided that feeding people was an important thing that needed to happen because of the pandemic, that a lot of people who were undernourished or weren't getting the proper food it became more evident. And so they put some dollars to that and supported nonprofit organizations that could then buy from farms, directly from farms, to feed people. And that was a big success, in that some of the farms that I was able to buy from, I work with a group called East West Food Rescue, where we get food to those in need, produce to those in need. And that money, what's happened since is during the pandemic, there was a fair amount of money to buy from local growers. That money is also drying up. So there's not that available. So I think while we learned a lot in the pandemic, one about food, people that were going hungry, who you know, maybe might have been in the background, but and that everybody deserves good produce, that we didn't learn how to readjust our food system. And there has been, I mean, I think it's on a learning process. There is some grants that are available to growers now to expand their post-harvest handling equipment, or their coolers, or those kind of things, to become more available. But the pressure, since the pandemic has kind of gone away, the pressure has eased, and I think that we need to keep it up, because we really need to develop the structures that have gone away in the county over the last 50 years, and just don't exist here. So.
Thank you. This next question is for Justin, and then I'll invite Diane to weigh in if you'd like. You know, I think we have so much imported food from California, from Mexico, from many different areas from all over the world, but it's not a great strategy in an era of climate change. Can you all just talk a little bit about like why reliance on imported food is not a great long-term strategy for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is long-term, and I think you kind of highlighted too, just in this era, because there's certain efficiencies that come out of like having things streamlined like that, right? But at the same time, anytime you do that, anytime you concentrate, anytime you bring things into just one line, one stream, it's inherently vulnerable, right? And I think that's the major thing, that that just over reliance on that leaves us vulnerable. And we need to have some kind of way that, well, really both things can work, like that it can be sustained on a local level, that the food security can be sustained on a local level, yet like even if like something local falls through, we're able to get it from somewhere else. So we have that
is a vice president for a grocery chain, and I've had some interesting conversations with him on food security and such. And a surprising fact that he gave me was the average supermarket has about 3 days of food in it for normal shopping. So if a truck doesn't show up on a normal schedule, they would be bare shelves in 3 days. What we saw in the pandemic was when scarcity happens and people get nervous and start panic buying, that 3 days goes down to a matter of hours. So anything from a trucker's strike to roads being closed due to wildfires or earthquakes or anything else can really cause our food shelves to be empty really, really quickly. And so if there isn't a local food scene and a way to distribute, those go way more into effect, because you're talking about thousands of miles of roads that need to stay open to get us our food, instead of just tens or hundreds of miles of food. Someone in the comments had mentioned the Facebook group, Clark County Farm to Table. I'm super active in that group. It is a really, really good way to find local food. There's lots of meat producers on there. There's lots of vegetable producers on there. You just hop on, say what you're looking for, and I guarantee you'll have 10 people responding, trying to sell you beef, chicken, veggies, mushrooms, whatever. So it's a really, really good resource for local foods.
Yeah, I think the chart that I showed that shows miles to market sort of answers this question, because the more, and California is facing, everything that we get mostly comes from California, Arizona, or Mexico. And it all has to come through California or Nevada. And so you think of how the food gets here and how much of it is grown in, California has challenges of their own with heat and labor and water. And so there's a lot of conversation about how much less they're producing, and I see it in the market too. How much, like how long in the year are tomatoes coming from Mexico now, as opposed to it almost like they're Mexican grown and then they're local and then they go back to Mexico and pretty much skip California altogether. So that is a heck of a lot of things to rely on from another country and from a country that's 2,000 miles away. So the more that we can get from our own state or from Oregon, the better off we're going to be. But we're all facing similar issues with labor, and labor is a huge issue too, that there just isn't enough people to work on farms. As that's another national issue that we haven't really talked about, but it definitely affects farming around. And there is conversation about irrigating more of Eastern Washington to compensate for the lack of, for agriculture disappearing more and more from California. So I think that investment in our own local food system is something that really makes a lot of sense, in the monetary sense, really, because it's so.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to take us in one new direction, and then we'll see if we have some time for a couple questions from the audience. So Mike, you had shared some great technical advice for farmers and how you're thinking about bringing in new strategies for your farm related to climate change. I'm curious about how having a community of farmers is also important, maybe as important as technical advice for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really surprised me. That was one of the great things about selling at the farmers market, was the networking with other farmers, and having the resources to send a message out to a group of people and say, hey, are you having this problem? Whether it be a pest problem or a sales problem, and having a group of people get back to you and give you that advice. We've gone so far, and Mo is a part of this, as we got about 12 flower farms together in Clark County and have started a flower cooperative, for lack of a better term, where we just help each other. And our motto is collaboration over competition. We've realized that all of us do it differently. All of us have different customer bases, and all of us are doing totally different things with our flower businesses. There's times where someone has a large order, doesn't have enough, and they can contact one of the other people in the group to get it filled. But it's also, you know, hey, I'm having this weird bug thing. Anybody else got this going on? What's working? What's not working? And talking about sales routes and how we can work together. And one of the things we've talked about, and I think it circles back to this whole thing, is eventually the long-term goal would be to have a flower facility where we can all bring stuff in cooperatively and have florists come to us as a group instead of us coming to us as individuals. They've got that up in Seattle and it's working really good. There is a wholesale market in Portland, and a few farms go to that, but it would be really nice to have something more local to us so we don't have to cross the bridge and we can keep the money more local.
Justin, this goes back to you talking about the kind of contiguous nature of farms, right? And the importance of having these farm communities.
Mhm.
Do you want to just expand on kind of like why community is so particularly important in farming and why having farm or ag districts are so important?
Yeah, Mike was alluding to this too. Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about it, just like what happens with Clark County as being sort of isolated in a sense. It makes it just that much harder to self-advocate as a group, you know, um, versus like if you're part of the Willamette Valley proper, so to speak, you have this like large contingency of farms, lots of contiguous farmland. Um, you have an example, you know, to go off of. It's just a very different situation from like a lobbying standpoint, from an advocacy standpoint. Um, and I guess going to like the parcelization component, it's part and parcel of that, but there's also with the parcelization, there's that loss of efficiency that you get. And from breaking up contiguous farmland. Um, you know, not only are maybe you not having farming neighbors, you're also, like I said, you're moving equipment on busy roads, and you know, you're getting a lot more complaints from neighbors that don't understand farming. In a sense, sometimes that's viewed as opportunity, you know, to bridge the gap, but in practice, it's difficult. It's just really hard, you know, to not have people that understand what you're doing. And I think having those things more together, more contiguous, more cohesive, it's a bigger example. It's like a more shining example of like what your value is in the community and what you do. And it's like, oh, that's what they do. We can see what they do, and it's important. Whereas if you're just isolated, it's so much harder.
Megan, did you ask them?
I would add that some farms get tickets for driving tractors on the highways because they move so slowly, and big equipment, you know, that kind of thing. So that's part of where we need right to farm laws that ensure farmers have the ability to not get pestered from their neighbors because they're fertilizing and it stinks, or they're up at 6 o'clock in the morning moving equipment around. And because a lot of times people move into an agricultural area because, like I said, it's beautiful, but they don't want to deal with farmers themselves and all the different
Farm
aspects.
operation.
They're running a business, you know, farmers are running a business, and they need to be able to operate in their sphere and not be restricted by what the neighbors think. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm seeing some folks kind of jumping off in the chat and running away, and I feel like that's a good call for me to say. I'm going to move into some call to action for us and then allow people to get on with the rest of their night. First, I just want to thank our panelists so much for their time. Second, I want to just say that I have their contact information in the slide deck. So if you had like a burning question for one of these individuals, you will be able to get in touch with them. And also we'll have all the information for Friends of Clark County. We are here to answer your questions if you have them. So we will certainly do that. But I will just quickly share my screen again and wrap us on up here. In one moment. Okay, let me find where I'm at in this slide thing and get us moving along. All right. You heard some of this already, but I would wanted to share that some ideas for you to get involved with the local food movement. So please, Clark County has tons of climate change surveys coming out right now. I encourage you to take those surveys and talk about local food and the importance of agriculture in those surveys. You know, this county runs on participation, so encourage you to participate and make sure that your voice is heard. We also encourage you to follow and engage in comprehensive planning, which is happening right now through the end of next year, and really promote what Diane was talking about before, no net loss of agricultural land. We need every acre that we have to be retained in this next upcoming comprehensive plan. So I really encourage you to contact your county counselor and let that preference be known. You can also support implementation of an agricultural commission in the county. We have so many commissions here, but we don't have one on agriculture. There's some momentum happening. So this is a great time again to contact your counselor and share that. And you can also support policies that encourage farming more broadly. So there's lots of information on the Friends of Clark County website about this. You can find on our blog. You can search by local food and farming and read policy positions and better understand how you can engage and encourage local policy that is good for farmers and farmland. On the other side, you can certainly make sure that you're buying from local producers. I saw lots in the chat coming in about folks sharing ideas about where you could get connected with a local farmer. Love to see that. There is actually no shortage of resources about how to do that, and even if it's just through a Facebook group. And also we encourage you to visit local farmers markets. And Diane mentioned that we can also encourage our local grocers to carry local food. So where you're spending your money does really matter. And if you're spending it locally, it's going to support a small farmer farming right here. And it does a lot for our economic viability of our small farms. For Friends of Clark County, our calls to action are please donate to support our mission. And we have an awesome annual dinner coming up in September. We encourage you to join us for that. It's very fun and it's very good food and you support our mission. You could get involved with Friends of Clark County by volunteering or joining our board. As you saw tonight, being a board member is fun and engaging and you get to do all sorts of great things. So we would encourage you to do that. You can also just stay informed with Friends of Clark County and all the great stuff we're doing by signing up for our newsletter and following us on social media. If you don't follow us on social media, Carissa is our community engagement manager, and she posts all sorts of great stuff, not just from Friends of Clark County, but from other groups around that are doing cool things and fun things. And it's a great follow. And we also really encourage you to engage with our elected officials. I know that I saw Sue in the chat tonight. I know we've had other folks join previous forums. These folks work for us and they care about your perspectives, but if they're not hearing from you, they don't know what they are. So I really encourage you to engage. Every time I have engaged with county staff or elected officials, I felt like they listened and were open to feedback, and I continue doing it because it's awesome to know that there's people listening to my perspectives. With that, friends, I'm going to say good night. Thank you for joining so much. We really appreciate you, and we will make sure to send out an email with all of these materials and a link to a survey. And thank you so much to our panelists. Go eat something delicious and local tonight.
Thanks.
Thank everyone. Appreciate you. Terry, say bye.